Good morning and welcome to the Liverpool Daily News. I'm James Martin and today I'm joined by Emmet Gates. We're previewing the Manchester City game. Of course, historically, over the last few years at least, it's been a huge fixture for Liverpool. Maybe perhaps a little less so based on the season so far. At this stage, it looks like Liverpool will be aiming for a top four slot rather than necessarily competing for the top honours at the top of the Premier League. But it's not a game that Liverpool want to lose at any stage, is it, Emmett?
No, I think, and as you said, these two sides have almost become rivals. Obviously, not based in geography, but more in terms of winning things, and competing at the highest level of not just even the domestic game, but the European level. Obviously, there's been Champions League quarterfinals um, over the last 4 or 5 years, and obviously challenging every year. Essentially, these two sides have been the preeminent sides in English football over the last 5 6 years. So a rivalry kind of has blossomed out of challenging for the biggest honours. So yeah, it's as you said, it's never a game that Liverpool want to lose, and especially now when they actually do need wins and need confidence. So yeah, it's definitely a must-win game from a Liverpool perspective.
Yeah, I mean, when you're winning all of the other games, you can sort of afford to go into the Manchester City match thinking, well, if we come out with anything, we've not done too badly. But when you're sort of 12 points down on where you were from the equivalent fixtures last season, you do really need to sort of eat into that deficit by managing to pick up a result against Manchester City. But yes, that's always easier said than done, unfortunately. But I suppose coming into it on the back of the Rangers game, does that give you more confidence for this one, or do you just sort of write that off as a big win against a pretty bad team?
Yeah, I think it would be more of the latter, to be honest. I mean, we've seen, you know, Rangers have got a lot of bad results in Europe in this group. They lost, what was it, 4-0 to Ajax, they lost 3-0 to Napoli, and Liverpool did a good number on them over both games. And I think they go to Naples next, and they'll probably get another bad result there too. So I wouldn't take too much confidence, on Liverpool's half from that win at Ibrox. I think Rangers are just a bad side, to be honest. I think just the gap between English and Scottish football now is so big, it's mammoth, that it's hard to take, many positive things from that game. But I mean, a win's a win at the end of the day. I'm sure it will do Liverpool some good, but I wouldn't. City, the difference between Rangers and City is absolutely huge, and it's going to be Sunday's going to be a lot different than than Wednesday night was.
But be that as it may, I do think Klopp will probably have had a dilemma somewhat deepened by that Rangers game in the sense that Roberto Firmino, once again among the goals, 2 goals and an assist, has he made himself undroppable from a position of being, sort of the fifth choice striker at times last season? Are we going into the Man City game now saying Firmino has to start?
Yeah, I mean it's an odd one in the sense that, because I mean we all have written over the summer for, we'd all written for Liverpool.com that this could be the end of Firmino, and that he will be just, we kind of all predicted that his role would basically be making cameo appearances coming off the bench for the last 20 25 minutes. But as it happens, the way events have unfolded, he's almost become, as you say, undroppable at this point. He got 2 goals against Rangers, and at times he's looked a lot better than Darwin Nunez, who's obviously still taking his time to settle into the club. So a case could be made that, Firmino should be given the start against City. My only issue is that Nunez would probably give Pep Guardiola more to think about in terms of his physicality, his movement, and his pace. Whereas Firmino, as much as we all love him, his pace has declined slightly over the last couple of years, and he would probably be more predictable, should we say, in terms of his movement and what to expect. Whereas Nunez, I think at this point, is still, teams don't know really how to defend against him as such. So from that perspective, I think the Uruguayan would give City's defense more to think about, but at the same time, Firmino's a man in form, so you kind of maybe have to edge more towards Firmino and giving him, he's banging in the goals, so why not repay that faith and give him a start. But yeah, I could see it going either way, to be honest.
Yeah, you keep on talking yourself into each one as you go to discuss it. It really is a dilemma. But we'll get on to Nunez in a second. You mentioned him there, but Ramin makes a good point in terms of how many positions are we actually talking about against Manchester City. He says, I think he'll surprise Pep with going back to 4-3-3. Of course, that's what we've associated with Liverpool over the years, over the Klopp years at any rate. But, in the last few games, we've had, what could variously be called a 4-4-2, 4-2-4, 4-2-3-1, take your pick. But basically, there's an extra attacking slot in there. Do you think that will persist against Man City, or do you think we will sort of revert to what we know?
I think the 4-4-2 has kind of maybe come out of necessity, maybe. I would personally think Jurgen Klopp will edge more towards a tried and trusted 4-3-3. But again, as you say, with so many attacking options now, it's kind of a shame, to maybe go back to a 4-3-3 because there's only so many attackers you can put on in a 4-3-3. So, and then like against Rangers, we saw Fabio Carvalho starting a left midfield, which was good to see. So, but I do believe that Klopp will kind of revert back to, the usual 4-3-3 formation. But then again, he could surprise us and basically keep the same side or the same formation that we saw against Rangers. So, yeah, but my feeling is that he probably will go back to his usual 4-3-3. But again, it could be something that he keeps in the pocket, and then on the day of the game, we find out it's a 4-4-2 just to kind of spring a surprise. So, yeah, it's difficult to say at this point, but again, as you say, I'm talking myself in and out of both situations here. I think it will be a 4-3-3.
Yeah, I suppose it's a good thing that he's keeping us guessing, because if he's keeping us guessing, he'll be keeping Pep guessing as well. Liverpool have maybe been guilty of being a bit too predictable over the last couple of years. The Champions League final is the example we always go back to. Carlo Ancelotti basically said afterwards that he knew exactly how Liverpool were going to play. I don't think he could say that anymore. That's not necessarily a good thing because it means we might be winning 9-0 one week and then losing some awful game the next week. But certainly some unpredictability has entered the fray. And yeah, with the formation, that's a clear example. We'll go on to Nunez now. So let's assume there's one striker position up for grabs. That would leave him in a shootout with Firmino. So we've talked about the pros of Firmino, but what about Nunez? His start has maybe come under a lot of scrutiny, but he's got 2 goals in 2 games now. He's sort of getting up some rhythm after, let's not forget, he had to be out of the team for a while with that suspension. So, and both before and after that suspension now, he has shown, really promising signs. He came on against Fulham, did really well. He came on against Manchester City, in fact, in the Community Shield and changed the game. So I suppose he could feel quite hard done by as well if he doesn't get the nod.
Yeah, with Nunez, it's an odd one in the sense that there's some games where it looks like, yep, this is it. He's finally, he's settled in and he's kind of getting into the rhythm of the team. And then there's other games where he looks as almost like he just arrived in Liverpool yesterday. He just looks so out of sync with his teammates. And obviously the 3-game suspension for the sending off against Palace didn't help that, his settling into the side. And he's kind of been up and down. As I said, one game he looks brilliant, the next game he doesn't. It's kind of hard to judge him at this point. Obviously, we all have to give him time. It's not everybody's a Luis Diaz that can hit the ground running, and they've played like they've seemingly been at Liverpool for years. But yeah, he did look sharp against Rangers, but again, it's difficult to take any, not any positives, but just the gap in quality between Liverpool and Rangers was stark, and we saw that over both games, basically. But yeah, part of me thinks that he could give Pep the more to think about in terms of the battle between him and Pep's defenders. So, but I do think you kind of have to go with Firmino, given that he's in form and he's banging in the goals. But yeah, I think Nunez is definitely, he is someone good to have for a substitute in case things aren't going well in the last 20, 25 minutes. But I do think maybe post-Christmas, post maybe World Cup break, we will see the best of Nunez. it will give him more time. Obviously, he's going to be at the World Cup, but I do think that at the moment the language barrier is an issue because we've heard Jurgen Klopp come out and say, and Nunez say that when Klopp gives team talks, Nunez doesn't understand anything, and Klopp has said the same when he's tried to talk to Nunez is through an intermediary. So I think the language is an issue, and that will have to work itself out. But again, that's going to happen over time. So I think for now, Firmino probably will get the nod against City, but I think Nunez is showing signs of, he's finally slowly settling in. And again, like I said, not every player's like Luis Diaz, so I think we just have to have patience with Nunez, and he will come good. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I think you make a good point with the language barrier. I think that's probably an underrated part of football because, all the fans see is what goes on the pitch. But, imagine trying to do your job surrounded by people giving you instructions that you can't understand. Like, it's obviously going to make things harder. But yeah, all things considered, he's definitely on the right trajectory. Kumar agrees with you there. He says Nunez is as good as he has been, but City might be a bit too much for him to start. He still needs some time to settle. And yeah, I think the good thing about all of these attacking options is that Liverpool can give him that time to settle. I suppose there's one option who we still haven't even really talked about, which would be Diogo Jota. He's getting the nod in Kumar's team. Kumar says Klopp would start Jota, Firmino and Salah. Ramin agreeing a little bit there. He says Jota and Salah cut in with Nunez as a 9, so a slightly different shape, but again with Jota getting the nod. I suppose he's probably one who's benefited from the injury to Luis Diaz. So I suppose you can make a strong case for him, particularly if Liverpool do go in the traditional 4-3-3. But he's not scored in 20 games for Liverpool either. So yeah, it's a tricky one. He got those 3 assists against Rangers, but we've done to death how much or little we can read into that Rangers game. So yeah, where are your thoughts out on Jota at the minute?
Yeah, again, Jota's one of those. Like in the first half of last season, he was arguably one of Liverpool's best players. He was contributing goals. I mean, he had 20 by Christmas or January or February. Like by the end of the winter, he had 20 goals. But since then, there's been injuries, and Luis Diaz's impact. It's forced Klopp to use Sadio Mane through the middle, and Jota kind of fell down the pecking order towards the end of last season. This season, he's had injuries and he's slowly working his way back. I wouldn't start him. But again, he could be someone to come off the bench, maybe 20, 25 minutes, whatever is left, if need be. And again, as you say, he's kind of filled in for Luis Diaz recently. So Jota's a difficult one to kind of rate in terms of where he sits in this current Liverpool side. But I see him probably where he was at the tail end of last season. Maybe 3rd or 4th choice, maybe 5th choice. You could maybe throw on Harvey Elliott before you would throw on Jota. So it's a difficult one. And again, as you say, he hasn't scored in over 20 games, but he did get 3 assists against Rangers. So yeah, I think Jota's almost found his place within this Liverpool squad as 4th or 5th choice. So it's a difficult one, but I can't see him starting against City on Sunday.
Yeah, you mentioned Harvey Elliott there, another one who did very well against Rangers. So yeah, I mean, it's nice dilemmas to have, and it's certainly better than even a few weeks ago when you could basically name the starting 11 just because they were the only 11 who were fit in their respective positions. So yeah, it's nice for Klopp to have some options. Marty McFly says we need Bobby in the front row. I mean, I don't think Klopp will want to argue with a time traveller anytime soon. Maybe he knows something we don't. But yeah, I think we'll pretty much leave it there. It's an interesting game. It's an interesting selection headache. It'll be great to see what Klopp goes with. We'll have you covered all the way up to the game and indeed after the game with content on Liverpool.com all across the Blood Red channel. So be sure to check out all of that. For now, thanks a lot, Emmet, for joining me. Thanks to everyone who's got involved in the comments, and we'll see you all very soon.